It's the Holocaust of today, and it's a crime against humanity. We cannot ignore this.
It's a technologically advanced evil, but it's still evil.
The first survivor of China's state-sanctioned forced organ harvesting, Mr. Chen Peiming, shared his harrowing experience at a press conference in Washington, D.C. on July 3rd, which I streamed on my channel. And he exposed his story and the ongoing forced organ harvesting in China. And again, in August, he joined another press conference to testify and offered a rare and disturbing glimpse into the horrors faced by prisoners of conscience in China, particularly practitioners of Falun Gong. His testimony is unprecedented in exposing the hidden horrors of the brutal industry. And interestingly enough, the Chinese government, for the first time, responded to this case, of course, with all the denials. So on September 4th, Mr. Chen and the human rights leaders held a press conference in the Washington, D.C. again at the Canon office building and rebut Chinese government's claims. I interviewed a couple of the speakers at the press conference. One is Dr. Robert Destro, the former Assistant Secretary of State, who is actually responsible for rescuing Mr. Chen into the United States a few years ago. And another guest is Ms. Nina Shea, Senior Fellow and the Director of Center for the Religious Freedom at Hudson Institute. So let's hear from them why they feel this case is important and what's their takeaway of why the Chinese governments made their first response to such case.
Thank you again for being here. What are we doing here today? Well, we're here for this third press conference, which is to provide a rebuttal to the misinformation that's been published by the Chinese government of forced organ harvesting and Mr. Chen Peiming, who survived forced organ harvesting.
In November 2004, I was forcibly taken to the fourth hospital of Daqing by the Chinese Communist Party, where I underwent the only surgery of my life, a thoracotomy that left me with a 35-centimeter scar.
People now know how Mr. Chen was able to come. So when you helped to rescue him, did you know about his experience of being organ harvested?
Yes, I mean, that was actually what I was told. I mean, that was one of the reasons I told my staff, get him out, because we needed the witness. And like I said, if nobody paid any attention to this ever, he's still out.
And now, the CCP, Chinese Communist Government, for the first time, they really respond to, a case which is claimed as organ harvesting. So what do you think that means?
Well, I think that the issue is on the table now for the first time in a long time. We have to be careful, though, that we don't just focus on one person. That this is a huge market. There are many people, doctors, lawyers, middlemen who are making tons of money on this. They're the criminals.
They still blatantly, just claim Falun Gong as, called or things like that.
No, the Chinese government is not going to admit a thing. I mean, I'm surprised they admitted as much as they did. But the fact is that they make hundreds of millions of dollars on this every year. Plus, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the senior Chinese leadership has had more than one organ themselves. I don't know that to be true, but I wouldn't be surprised.
The Chinese government, while they try to rebut, right, but they have not been really open to international investigation.
Criminals are very rarely willing to admit their crimes.
What do you think should be done?
Well, I think we need to keep the pressure up. I think that we need to be really educating journalists. We need to be calling out the social media companies that smother these stories, because unless we have the freedom to talk about these things, we're never going to fix them.
What do you think, on the Chinese government side, the human rights lawyer David Mattis has been called this is really the form of evil has never been seen on this earth. So what do you think of that?
Well, I think it's completely evil. It's a technologically advanced evil, but it's still evil.
Mr. Chen, he expressed a gratitude to what you have done. He's not here, this first known survivor of the forced organ harvesting.
No, it's amazing that he's here. It's amazing that he survived to tell his story. And for me, getting him out of Thailand was just part of doing my job. I don't need credit for it, but I'm really happy it happened.
You mentioned how you believe Mr. Chen's testimonial. So please tell us why.
Well, I had an opportunity to privately meet with him, with a translator, and we went over what happened to him, his story. I saw his scar, enormous scar that wraps around his body. It's not explained by an operation to remove something that he swallowed. I saw the scans, the medical scans that showed the parts of his organs that were missing, and I read the doctor reports that validate them. There were incidentals about how he escaped and how he managed to make it here, and that I then discussed with other experts who are not members or practitioners of Falun Gong, but who are experts in human rights in China, and they validated that. They said this is what happens, this is the way people escape, this is plausible that, how he got out of the hospital, that kind of thing. So that's why, that's the big reason why I believe his case in particular. There is no explanation for why part of his lung would be missing, or the other parts. But the other thing is the backdrop of all of this is the massive practice of forced organ harvesting in China. And I have delved into that for a number of years now, and looked at all the evidence and reviewed it and evaluated myself and written about it and spoke about it, and had experts come to my office. And I also had a podcast of David Kilgore before he passed away, and David Mattis, and somebody, Matthew Robertson, and so Ethan Gutman, and so I have reviewed all of that information, plus the UN Special Rapporteur's letter and statement, and it is overwhelmingly convincing, persuasive, credible, and alarming, shocking.
So to you, why this is important, for you obviously spent a lot of time and efforts in that.
It's the Holocaust of today, and it's a crime against humanity. We cannot ignore this. It is also infecting our own ethical standards, our own medical standards, because the United States, and when I say we, because the United States is complicit. It's complicit, and the Americans are complicit by our hospitals and medical schools who are training Chinese transplant surgeons, who are supporting them, funding them, doing joint research with them, without any moral qualms, even as they scrupulously abide by ethics, moral ethics in the United States. They export their experiments and they leave their ethics at the border. And I think that's extremely troubling. We're on the road to perdition. We're on the road to abandoning medical ethics here if we normalize this or look the other way.
So now we saw that the Chinese government, for the first time, they're really responding in length, right, towards a case of forced organ harvesting. So to you, what does that mean?
I'm a lawyer by background, so I see this as corroboration of various important points. Like, how did we know that he was really in the hospital? How did we know he was really a prisoner? How do we know any of his story is true? Well, they just corroborated it, that he was a prisoner, that he was in the hospital, that he did have surgery, that he had surgery without his consent. And now with this latest response of anger, burst of anger from the police, security police, further confirms that they have something to hide, that they are defensive. It's not from the hospital. It's not from the doctor who worked on him. It's from the police, the security police, the feared security police. So I think that is also implicates them, and it's a form of admission, that a form of confession in a way that they were involved and are involved in forced organ harvesting.
Well, Mr. Chen is, so far the only known survivor of forced organ harvesting by CCP. What do you think, the significance, or, what's your take?
Well, I think that it's extremely significant that there was a survivor, because all along the biggest defense that I've heard coming from the CCP and from their friends here was that, well, there's just no evidence. I remember media outlets kept saying that, where's the evidence? Where's the new information? It's just these allegations and just circumstantial evidence. So now there is a living person who survived this ordeal. We have the medical proof of it, and I hope they're interested in hearing about it. And I challenged the BBC, who has been specifically asking for evidence, to do a story on this. I challenged them.
So what do you think needs to be happen?
I think that the United States government has to ban all cooperation with the Chinese medical, the transplantation sector at a minimum until there's some kind of confirmation. I don't think we have to wait for a confirmation or independent investigation. I think we should cut them off now, and there should be an executive order from the new administration, whoever that is, to end all cooperation between us and China in the transplant industry, organ transplant industry.
Including the training?
Including doctors training, surgeons training, including conferences, including grants and fellowships, exchanges, yes, journal review articles in American publications. Or I think that the United States needs to take that step immediately. Until there's proof otherwise, the burden of proof has to be on the Chinese government at this point.
Actually, back in 2006, when the news broke out, and the international community actually formed a investigation kind of group trying to go to China. I tried to get a visa going to China with this investigation. I got refused the visa. Yeah. So in terms of investigation, what do you think?
I don't think there is going to be an investigation, because that's why I think that we need to stop it immediately, stop the cooperation immediately with the transplant sector of China, and put the burden of proof on the Chinese government to allow an independent investigation. If they don't allow it, then that ban does not get lifted. And if they do allow it and we see evidence of it, then that ban does not get lifted.
We also broadcasting to China. So what do you like to say to the people in China? Some of them are Falun Gong practitioners still under this brutal persecution. Some are the innocent people, Chinese people, but may not know about this still today.
Yeah, I think it's important that we have, as we did during Soviet communism, to have a close exchange of information. If we can get your information in China, we can help other people in China learn about what is going on in other parts and other sectors, and help the West understand better what life is like under the CCP rule, the character of the regime, the character of the party, about how the only morality, the only standard, the total betrayal of the Confucian and Buddhist heritage, Taoist heritage, but the only morality is what is good for the party. And it's absolutely monstrous.
For the people here in the United States, including some Chinese Americans, they still being brainwashed, believing the brainwashed. And for the general, our fellow Americans, never been to China.
We have a lot of persuasion to do, a lot of publicity to do on this. And I'm glad you're doing some publicity, your share of publicity.
In China, it's being conducted by the government, the military, the hospitals.
They can't do it alone. There are people who have to go out and pick people up off the street. It's not just Falun Gong practitioners. Now that they do blood typing, they snatch people off the streets. But it happens in other places too.
In China, young students missing.
Yes. Yes, I mean that the amount of human trafficking, and organ harvesting is one form of human trafficking. There's sex trafficking, there's corpse trafficking, I mean, there's just, slave trafficking. I mean, it's a huge business, and the fact that the media weren't here today except for you tells you all you need to know.